When you accept that resting does not need to be earned through exhaustion. When you say no without adding explanations or justifications that drain your energy. When you stop treating every problem as something that must be solved right now. When you realize that many things feel urgent but are not actual emergencies. When you allow silence instead of filling every moment with noise or activity. When you accept that control has limits and not everything can be managed perfectly. When you focus only on what is possible today instead of worrying about everything ahead. When you slow your pace instead of rushing through everything at once. When you stop reacting to situations that do not truly affect your well-being. When you separate your worth from how productive or busy you appear to be. When you take regular breaks before your body forces you to stop. When you stop trying to keep everyone satisfied at your own expense. When you let go of the need to control outcomes. When you allow yourself to change your mind without self-criticism. When you stop checking messages and notifications constantly. When you give your attention to one task instead of dividing it across many. When you replace perfectionism with acceptance. When you allow mistakes instead of treating them as failures. When you ask for help instead of carrying everything alone. When you stop comparing your path to someone else's timeline. When you accept that some days naturally feel heavier than others. When you stop measuring progress through other people's lives. When you stop over-explaining your choices to others. When you step away from situations that continuously drain you. When you acknowledge emotions instead of suppressing them. When you validate your own feelings instead of dismissing them. When you allow patience to return instead of forcing outcomes. When you allow quiet moments without guilt. When you limit access to your time and energy intentionally. When you replace overcommitment with realistic expectations. When you release unrealistic standards and accept what is possible. When you accept that not everything needs an answer right away. When you stop labeling rest as laziness. When you step back instead of pushing harder. When you give problems time to settle naturally. When you set boundaries without apology. When you simplify life instead of adding more to it. When you move at a pace your body can support. When you practice calm daily instead of waiting for it. When you stop trying to prove your worth. When you pause before burnout arrives. When you choose peace over pressure. When you remove urgency from situations that do not require it. when you limit responsibility to what is truly yours. When you release small issues instead of holding on to them. When you make decisions slowly instead of rushing them. When you care for yourself without needing permission. When you recognize that what you are doing is already enough. When you slow your breathing and let your body settle. When you pause emotional reactions instead of acting on them immediately. When you wait for calm before making decisions. When you remove unnecessary tasks from your day. When you stop using pressure as part of your identity. When you release responsibility for outcomes you cannot control. When you keep your attention in the present moment. When you allow calm without needing a reason. When you stop carrying yesterday into today. When you replace constant pushing with balance. When you make small, calm choices repeatedly. When you limit constant stimulation and noise. When you accept imperfection. When you stop fixing other people's problems. When you trust yourself instead of overthinking everything. When you give attention only to what truly matters. When you make deep breathing a habit. When you allow healing to take time. When you recognize small progress. When you release control over what cannot be controlled. When you live at a pace that feels sustainable. When you allow calm to build gradually instead of demanding it instantly. Stress begins when the mind stays constantly alert, reacting without pause and expecting itself to handle everything at once. It continues when speed replaces judgment and pressure becomes normal. As reactions slow and choices are made more carefully, the body and mind respond naturally. Calm does not come from fixing every issue, but from allowing some things to remain unfinished without tension. Over time, clarity returns when attention is limited and effort is used only where it truly matters.